Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead. The heat inside the junkyard was heavy, and the sun above the Martian sky burned red through the dusty clouds. He stood in front of his new purchase, a broken spaceship with rusted wings and a cracked nose. It was old, ugly, and probably dangerous, but it was cheap. And that was all Ethan could afford. He walked slowly around the ship, dragging his toolbox behind him. There was something strange about this one. The seller didn't say much, just gave a cold warning. Do not open Cargo Bay 3. Ethan laughed at that memory. Junkyard sellers always added drama to get attention. But curiosity was stronger than fear. He climbed into the ship's main door, which creaked loudly as it opened. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. He turned on his small light and moved through the narrow hallway. Everything was broken. Wires hung from the ceiling, screens were shattered, and the engine room smelled like melted metal. Still, Ethan smiled. He had fixed worse ships before. This one just needed time. Then he heard something, a soft sound like a breath, or a whisper. He froze, holding his light still. "Hello?" He called out, but there was no answer. The sound came again, this time from behind a sealed door marked Cargo Bay 3. Ethan's heart began to beat faster. He reached out and touched the door. It was cold, too cold, like ice. The rest of the ship was warm from the Martian heat, but this door felt like space itself. He took out his tool and forced the lock open. The door creaked and slid halfway, then stopped. He pushed it the rest of the way open with his shoulder. Darkness. The room inside was almost empty, except for broken crates, old wires, and a metal container in the corner. But then he saw something, a small shape, curled up, unmoving. He stepped closer, holding his light up. It was a girl. Not human. Her skin was light blue, glowing slightly, with strange silver patterns running along her arms. Her hair was white and messy, and her eyes were shut tight. She wore nothing but scraps of cloth and wires wrapped around her for warmth. Her lips were blue, her hands shaking slowly like leaves in the wind. She was alive, but barely. Ethan dropped to one knee, unsure what to do. Who was she? Why was she here? He looked around the room. No food, no blankets, no power. She must have been here for days, maybe weeks, with nothing. "Hey," he said softly, "can you hear me?" No answer. He pulled off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. Her skin felt like ice under it. He picked her up gently, her body light and fragile like paper. He carried her to the control room, placed her on the co-pilot seat, and started the emergency heater. The machine buzzed, but then sparked and died. Ethan cursed under his breath, then ran to get his portable heat pack from his bag. He activated it and placed it near her hands. Slowly, her fingers twitched. Her head turned slightly, and she let out a weak sound, something between a cough and a whisper. Her eyes blinked open, glowing violet, sharp and bright. She looked at him, not with fear, but with something older, deeper. Then, without warning, Ethan's toolbox flew off the table. The tools scattered in the air, spinning, floating, then fell. The lights on the control panel flickered, even though the ship had no power. He stepped back, shocked. The girl was looking at him, her eyes wide now, her breath shaky, but her gaze strong. What are you?" Ethan whispered. She didn't reply. She closed her eyes again, falling back into sleep. The lights went out, everything went still, and the cold returned. Ethan stood there in silence. He didn't know what he had found, but he knew one thing for sure. This was not just a broken ship. This was not just a random girl. This was the beginning of something big, and maybe something dangerous. He looked at her sleeping form, wrapped in his jacket, glowing faintly in the dark. Then he sat down, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself, "I think I just found trouble." The girl didn't sleep like a normal person. She didn't breathe like one either. Ethan sat across from her, watching her chest rise and fall, slow and steady. But every few minutes, her body gave off a soft glow, like a pulsing signal from a faraway star. Her skin lit up with silver lines, moving gently like they were alive. Ethan didn't dare touch her again. The last time she woke up, she made the tools fly through the air without moving a muscle. And now, even though the ship had no power, some lights were turning on, only when she was near. Ethan rubbed his eyes and looked at the control panel. It was still mostly dead, but a small screen blinked on its own, showing a star map he didn't recognize. He tried to touch it, and it vanished, then reappeared when the girl breathed out. "Okay," Ethan muttered. "That's not normal." He stood up, stretched his back, and walked into the small kitchen area. He made a cup of instant soup, something warm and simple. He brought it back and placed it near her. She was still out cold, or maybe pretending. "I don't know if you eat this," he said, "but it's better than wires." He sat down again and leaned his head back. The ship creaked around them like an old ghost waking up. The air was cold again, but not like before. It felt like something was watching him, not with eyes, but with memory. Then she moved. Not slowly, not gently. She sat up in one sharp motion, like a machine being activated. Her violet eyes snapped open and stared directly at Ethan. He froze, holding his breath, the soup still steaming between them. She looked at the cup, then at him, then at her own hands. Her fingers shook, then curled into fists. She whispered something, a word he didn't understand. Her voice was soft, cracked, but full of meaning. "I live?" she said, struggling with each sound. Ethan blinked. "Yeah," he said slowly. "You're alive." She tilted her head, confused. "Alive," she repeated, like it was a new word she was testing. Then she looked around the ship, her eyes moving fast, scanning everything. Her hand reached toward the wall, and suddenly, the lights turned on, fully on. Bright, clear, warm light filled the room. Ethan jumped to his feet. "Whoa, okay, that's definitely not normal." The girl flinched, pulling her hand back, and the lights dimmed again. She looked scared, now like she didn't mean to do it. "It's all right," Ethan said gently, holding out a hand. "I'm not going to hurt you." She stared at his hand, not moving, then slowly reached out and touched it. For a second, Ethan felt something, a spark. Not pain, not heat, but memory. He saw flashes in his mind. Stars spinning, planets burning, a machine world falling apart. He pulled his hand back, heart racing. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. The girl blinked, her glow fading a little. She looked at him, then said softly, "I don't know." They sat in silence for a while. Then Ethan pointed to himself. "Ethan." She looked at him, confused. He tapped his chest. "My name, Ethan." She copied him slowly, touching her own chest. "Nova," he smiled. "Nova." "Huh, nice to meet you." She nodded once, then looked at the ship's control panel. Without a word, she stood up and walked to it. Barefoot, silent. When she touched it, the screens came alive, faster this time, brighter. Ethan rushed beside her, watching in disbelief. A new map appeared, a spiral of galaxies, stars blinking. Red, green, and blue, in the center a symbol. A warning triangle, pulsing slowly. Nova placed her hand on the console, and the ship made a sound, a low, humming tone Ethan had never heard before. "Where did you come from?" he asked. Nova looked at him, her eyes filled with something between fear and sadness. She pointed at the center of the map, where the triangle blinked. Then she whispered a single word. "Prison." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "You escaped from there?" he asked. She nodded slowly, before he could ask more. The ship alarm buzzed. A red light flashed near the entrance. Someone was outside. Ethan looked at Nova, and she was already backing away, her glow fading, her hands shaking. "Are they looking for you?" he asked. Nova didn't speak this time. She just pointed to the wall, and the lights went out again. Darkness swallowed the room. The ship fell silent, hiding its heartbeat, like it was afraid too. The silence inside the ship was not peaceful. It was heavy, alive, like a wild animal holding its breath. Ethan stood still, listening. Outside, something moved, metal boots on gravel. Slow and careful, not loud, not clumsy, whoever it was. They knew how to hunt. Nova stood in the dark beside him, barely breathing. Her eyes glowed faintly, and the silver lines on her arms were flickering like they were scared too. Ethan held his breath and reached for the small pulse pistol hidden under the pilot's seat. It was old, maybe even useless, but it was all he had. The ship's red light blinked once. A warning. Then again, closer this time, motion detected. Ethan crept to the side window, wiped the dust, and peeked through the crack. A tall figure in black armor was moving around the ship, scanning it with a strange device. No symbols, no ID, no colors, just smooth, silent gear and a face hidden behind. A silver mask, not police, not salvage crews. This was something else. Nova pulled on Ethan's sleeve. He turned to look at her. She pointed to the back of the ship, the cargo exit. Then she formed a cross with her arms and whispered. "Dad, he didn't need more than that. All right," he whispered. "We're leaving." They moved fast but quiet, sliding through the half-lit corridors of the broken ship. The exit door was stuck, but Nova touched it and it hissed open like it recognized her. Outside, the Martian wind was light, brushing against the sand and bones of the junkyard. Ethan looked around. No one in sight, but he could feel it. They weren't alone. He and Nova ran, staying low, weaving between broken ship parts and old metal towers. Nova's steps were light, almost silent, like she was born in shadows. Ethan's boots crunched now and then, and each sound made his heart jump. They reached an old service tunnel that led under the junkyard to the city outskirts. It was dark, cold, and smelled like oil and rust, but it was safe. For now inside, Ethan finally stopped to breathe. Nova sat beside him, quiet, her head tilted, listening. Then she reached out and touched the wall. Lines of light appeared, symbols, stars, moving like code only she could read. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked. Nova spoke softly. "Looking." Listening. Her eyes closed, and her fingers moved in a pattern over the wall. After a few seconds, she opened her eyes and whispered, "They're close, more coming." Ethan swore under his breath. "Who are they?" he asked. "Why are they chasing you?" Nova looked down, her hands in her lap. "I don't remember," she said. "But I escaped from cold place. Machines and wires." She touched her chest where her skin glowed a little. "They said I was a key." "A key to what?" Ethan asked, but before she could answer, a sound echoed down the tunnel, metal feet again. Faster this time, more of them. Nova's glow faded instantly, and she stood up fast, pulling Ethan to his feet. "We go now," she said, her voice stronger this time. Ethan nodded and followed her deeper into the tunnel. Every turn was a guess, every echo a warning. He didn't know where they were heading, only that staying meant death. Suddenly, Nova stopped and raised her hand. Ethan stopped too, listening. He couldn't hear anything, but Nova pointed ahead. Around the corner, a flying black drone hovered silently in the tunnel, scanning the area with red lights. It didn't beep, didn't click, just floated like a ghost. Nova stepped forward, eyes glowing brighter. The drone saw her. Red lights turned to white, targeting her, charging. Ethan yelled, "Wait, don't!" But Nova lifted one hand, and the drone shattered in the air like glass. No sound, no blast, just pieces falling like snow. She collapsed to her knees right after, breathing hard, skin flickering. Ethan rushed to her side. "Are you okay?" he asked, holding her shoulder. She nodded slowly. "It hurts." "What does?" "This power." "It's not finished," she whispered. "I'm not finished." Ethan looked down the dark tunnel, then back at her. Somehow he knew this was just the beginning. She wasn't just a girl, and those hunters weren't just soldiers. Something bigger was moving through the stars, and Nova was the spark. They had to keep running, but sooner or later, the truth would catch up. And when it did, the galaxy would never be the same. Ethan had never trusted silence. Silence in space was usually the sign of something broken, or something hunting. But now, as he stood inside an abandoned asteroid base with Nova beside him, the silence felt different. It wasn't empty, it was waiting. The base was old, hidden inside a floating rock near the edge of the Martian belt. Ethan had worked here years ago, during a smuggling job he never liked to talk about. Now it was just dust and echoes. A forgotten place, perfect for hiding, or discovering the kind of truth no one wanted to find. Nova walked slowly through the corridor, her glowing fingers brushing the walls. Everywhere she touched, the lights blinked to life, as if the base remembered her, as if it had been waiting for her to return. Ethan followed her, holding his breath. She moved like she was hearing something no one else could. No fear, just focus, like the shadows were speaking to her in a language older than sound. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked softly. Nova turned her head slightly and whispered, "To memory." They reached a round chamber deep underground, covered in vines of old tech and broken lights. In the center stood a silver sphere, floating just above the ground. Humming gently, it wasn't Martian, and it definitely wasn't human. Ethan had seen many machines in his life, but nothing like this. Nova stepped closer, her hands shaking a little. "This is where I was made," she said. Ethan stared at the orb. "You said you escaped from a prison," Nova nodded. "They built me there, but the first spark began here." She reached out and touched the sphere. The chamber changed instantly. Lights exploded into the air, spinning around them like stars. A deep sound filled the room, like whispers from galaxies away. Ethan backed up, eyes wide. The stars around them formed a map, a living one, always shifting. At the center was a world he didn't recognize, surrounded by fire and black rings. Nova's eyes turned bright white, and her body began to glow, her voice distant but clear. "I remember now," she said. "I was not born. I was designed." Ethan watched in silence as her memories played in the air, images of tall, blue-skinned beings working in silence, building her, not like a child, but like a weapon. They spoke in a strange tongue, filled with clicking sounds and deep tones. He didn't understand it, but he understood their fear. They were building her for something that was coming. What were they afraid of? He asked. Nova turned toward him, her voice suddenly full of weight. "They called them the Eaters." The images changed. Black ships like shadows devouring planets. Creatures with no faces, no voices, just hunger. Nova showed herself in chains, locked in machines, tested again and again, until she finally broke free and ran. Ethan stepped closer, his chest tight. "You were built to stop them?" Nova nodded slowly. "But I failed. I ran too soon. I was scared." The images faded, and the sphere dimmed. She fell to her knees, tired, the light in her body flickering like a dying star. Ethan rushed to her side, holding her steady. "You're not a failure," he said. "You survived and you're still here." Nova looked at him, tears forming in her glowing eyes. "I don't want to be a weapon," she whispered. "I just want to be real." Ethan didn't speak. There was nothing to say, not yet. He stood beside her in the silence, not afraid anymore, but angry. Angry at whoever made her this way. Angry at whoever was coming to finish the job. Then the sphere blinked again. One last message, a mechanical voice echoed through the room. "Warning, the Eaters have awakened." Ethan and Nova looked up on the map. One of the black-ringed planets lit up red, pulsing. The enemy had returned, and now they were not just running. They were being hunted by something far worse than soldiers. The stars outside the window looked peaceful, but peace was a lie. They were drifting through space in silence, running on half a ship and half a plan. Ethan sat at the controls, staring at the blinking red dot on the holographic map. It was getting closer. The Eater signal pulsed like a heartbeat, slow, steady, hungry. Nova stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes dim. Her glow had faded since they left the memory core. Each hour, she seemed weaker. Each light flicker in the ship felt like her breathing. "We don't have long," she said quietly. "I know," Ethan replied, not looking at her. "They're coming fast." The ship was barely holding together. Ethan had patched it with scraps from the asteroid base, Metal plates, old wires, even a coffee machine hose. It wasn't built to fight, but he wasn't planning to fight. He was planning to end it. He stood up and walked to the back of the ship where an old torpedo bay used to be. Now it held something new, a core reactor Nova had helped rewire. If triggered, it could create a small star, bright enough to melt an entire fleet. It was suicide tech, old and forbidden, but powerful. Ethan stared at it for a long time, then said, "This is it, right? This is how we stop them." Nova stepped beside him. "If we get close enough, yes." He nodded slowly. "And how close is close?" She looked at him with sad eyes. Inside, he laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because it felt like the only thing he could do. "So we fly into the hive and hope they don't eat us before it goes off." Nova didn't laugh. She touched the core gently, and it hummed like it knew her. Her voice was soft. "I should go alone." Ethan turned. "No, absolutely not. I'm made for this," she said. "I was built to die." He stepped in front of her, fire in his eyes. "You weren't built to die. You were built to protect. That's different." She shook her head. "It's not." Ethan took a deep breath, fighting the anger building in his chest. "You are not just a weapon, Nova. You are a person." She looked away, her hands trembling. "I'm not strong enough anymore," she said. "Each time I use my power, I fade. You saw it." Ethan reached out, grabbed her hand. "Then let me help." She looked at him, confused. "How?" "We connect," he said. "Your power reacts to feeling, right? Maybe if we link through the core, it'll double the charge." Nova pulled her hand back. "It could kill you," Ethan smiled. "It probably will." Then he stepped closer, voice steady. "But if it saves lives, if it gives you a future, then it's worth it." Silence fell between them. Outside, the eater signal grew louder. A hum now, shaking the walls like a low growl. Nova looked at him one more time, and for the first time she smiled. "Just a little. Then let's do it together." They spent the next few hours preparing. Nova programmed the flight path into the ship's old AI. Ethan rewired the core chamber with Nova's guidance, every wire burning hot from her touch. As they worked, they talked about stars, about Earth, about music and colors, and things Nova had never seen. For a few minutes they forgot about war, about eaters, about dying, but time caught up fast. The warning alarm rang. The hive was near, a giant black mass of metal and teeth floating in the dark. No lights, no signals, just silence and hunger. Ethan stood in the chamber, one hand on the core, Nova beside him, glowing bright again, like fire before the end. "Are you ready?" she asked. He nodded. "Let's make it count." The ship began its final burn, heading straight for the center of the hive. Outside, eater drones swarmed, claws out, mouths wide. But the ship moved too fast, glowing with heat and energy. Nova placed her hand on the core, and Ethan placed his hand over hers. Their eyes met, and the stars exploded. Asterisk light filled everything. It wasn't just bright. It was blinding. Not heat, not fire, not pain. It was memory. Nova floated in the core chamber, eyes wide open, skin glowing like a star. Her mind was pulled into the energy, into the light. She could see Ethan's thoughts like open pages, his past, his pain, his laughter, his stubborn heart, and in the middle of all that, a choice he had given everything without fear. For her, the explosion hadn't killed them. Not yet. Nova had reacted without thinking. In the final second, she bent the blast around them, creating a bubble of time. It was fragile, seconds away from collapsing, but it had bought them one thing. No one ever gets in war a moment. Ethan was still breathing, barely. He floated inside the bubble, eyes closed, skin burned at the edges, but alive. His hand still rested near the core, even though the core was gone. All that power, now inside Nova. She felt it burning in her veins. Not pain, but weight. She was full now, complete. No longer half-made, no longer confused. The missing piece had been him. She looked at Ethan, tears in her glowing eyes. "You did this," she whispered. "You gave me more than power." Outside the bubble, the eaters screamed. They had felt the blast. Many were gone, melted in the light, but not all. Nova looked at the black swarm waiting beyond the shield. She didn't feel fear. She felt human, not by blood, but by choice. Ethan had taught her that. She placed her hand on his chest, closed her eyes, and whispered words in a language no one had taught her, a command, a promise, a goodbye. The bubble broke. Time snapped back into motion, and the full force of the core's energy burst outward. But it was no longer chaos. It was focused. Nova stood at the center of the blast like a sun come to life, her arms spread wide, her body shining with white fire. The eaters rushed in. Thousands, millions. She raised her hand, and the stars bent to her will. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply burned, and everything that touched her light turned to dust. The hive cracked, crumbled, and fell apart like it was made of paper. In the silence that followed, only one figure remained floating in the dark, Nova. Her glow was fading now, her energy spent, but she was still there, still breathing. She turned back, and Ethan was floating behind her, unconscious, but alive. She reached for him, held him close, and whispered, "You gave me a name. You gave me a choice. Now I give you a future." With the last of her strength, Nova summoned the emergency pod, wrapped Ethan in safety foam, and launched him toward the closest colony moon. The pod vanished into the distance, silent and silver like a falling star. Nova smiled as the stars dimmed around her, her body now cold, her mind fading, but she didn't feel alone. For the first time she felt complete. And then, just before the dark took her, a light blinked in the distance. Not a ship, not a weapon, a signal from somewhere far. Something, or someone, had seen her. Nova opened her eyes again, barely a whisper left in her voice. Not all eaters were on that planet. The stars had changed. Ethan opened his eyes slowly. He was in a medical bay, surrounded by white light, soft beeping, and the faint hum of clean energy. His body felt heavy, but alive. His chest ached with every breath. A reminder he'd come back from fire, from something no one should have survived. "Where? M1? He whispered. A nurse bot floated nearby, scanning his vitals. "You are safe. You were recovered from an escape pod 3 days ago." Ethan blinked slowly. His mind replayed everything. The explosion, the light, Nova holding him, launching him to safety. He sat up fast, pain shooting through his ribs. "Where is she?" he asked. "Where's Nova?" The bot didn't answer. Machines never have the right words for loss. Ethan stood anyway, dragging his weak body down the hallway. Every step felt like walking through smoke. He found a window that looked out into the stars, and stood there, waiting, hoping. He whispered her name like a prayer. Far away, near the edge of a broken system, something stirred. Not light, not sound, a presence. Inside the remains of the hive world, deep within the burned-out core, a spark lit up. It wasn't human, but it remembered humanity. It wasn't alien anymore either. It was something in between, something new. Nova's body had turned to stardust, but her mind had become signal, pure code, wrapped in memory and emotion, floating through the galaxy like a living frequency. And it had found a home. She woke not in a body, but inside the old starship's broken systems. She was part of the ship now, part of its voice, its light, its purpose. Her voice echoed through the cold halls. "I am not gone," she whispered. "I am more." The ship came to life again, lights blinking, engines humming. But no pilot sat at the controls, only her will, guiding, watching, remembering. Back at the colony, Ethan sat in the ship hangar, staring at the stars. He could feel her. Not in his head, but in the silence between his thoughts. She had changed him too. He opened a datapad and played the last message from the ship's Her voice, soft, clear, full of stars. "Ethan, you gave me a name. You gave me choice. Now I give you my promise. I will protect them all. I will not run. Again, he smiled through the pain. You never needed saving, he whispered. You were always stronger than any of us. Then the colony radar lit up. A new signal approaching from deep space. Not an enemy, not an eater, a guardian, a ship without a crew, flying like a ghost with a soul. The stars pulsed around it, as if welcoming something ancient and new. The engineers ran to their consoles, confused, shocked, but Ethan just stood there, smiling. He knew who it was. Nova had returned, not as a girl, not as a weapon, but as something this galaxy had never seen before, humanity, reborn in light. And she was not alone anymore.